I was patching up the old leather chair in the garage when the phone rang. The sound cut through the quiet like metal striking the past. I looked at the screen. My hand stopped mid-air. Ryan. His name glowed against the dim, dust-colored light. I hesitated for a second, then answered. His voice came sharp and measured like he was reading a line from a contract. Dad, this Saturday, my company's hosting our 15th anniversary dinner. You should come. Everyone would love to see you. In the background, I could hear the clinking of glasses laughter, the soft murmur of music. But there was no warmth in his tone, just that practiced calm of someone who's learned to organize even his emotions into neat compartments. I asked if he was sure I should come. There was a short silence. Then he said, "Of course, make sure you dress properly. It's an important night." The last words fell lower, more like an order than an invitation. Then the line went dead. I sat still for a while, the hum of the fluorescent bulb above me filling the space where his voice had been. My hands were covered in glue and bits of fabric. On the wall hung the old photograph of Ellen, framed in oak, its colors fading to sepia. She was smiling softly like she still listened to every word I never said aloud. I looked at her face and murmured, "He called." I laughed under my breath. 10 years. He hadn't invited me anywhere in 10 years except his mother's funeral. Since Ellen passed, we'd become two branches of a river flowing in opposite directions, connected only by the occasional Christmas card or a polite text that meant nothing at all. I turned off the light. The garage fell into darkness. Outside, Seattle was draped in fog, the bay lights flickering through the window like distant memories. I stepped onto the porch, the air salted and cold. Winter rain began to fall, soft and steady. I stood there for a long time wondering what exactly I was supposed to bring to a party like that. Saturday arrived beneath a sky the color of smoke. I shaved, put on my gray suit, the one Ellen had mended at the sleeve years ago. My black shoes still carried the faint shine of habit more than care. The blue tie smelled faintly of her shampoo. I studied the man in the mirror, 63. A bit stooped, eyes still holding on to a quiet kind of fire. From the drawer, I took out a small wooden box. Inside lay a brass compass, the only thing left from my father. I'd meant to give it to Ryan on his wedding day, but the ceremony had been rushed and crowded more like a press release than a promise. Tonight I brought it with me not as a gift, but as a reminder. The streets of Seattle shimmered under the rain. I drove slowly, the wipers whispering across the glass. The city looked different now. Taller, sleeker, noisier. New glass towers rose where the old docks used to be. Billboards flashed tech slogans like commandments. It was his world now, not mine. Elliott's on the bay glowed warm against the gray water. From the parking lot, I could see the restaurant's golden lights ripple across the waves. I fixed my collar, stepped inside. The air smelled of wine perfume and seared scallops. A hostess in a black dress took my coat, checked the invitation, and smiled with professional brightness as she led me through the hallway, carpeted in red. When the doors opened, the light hit like a camera flash. A chandelier burned above the center table. Jazz music drifted through laughter. I stood there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. Then I saw him. Ryan stood near the middle of the room, tall, composed, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than my first car. His smile was perfect, the kind that comes with practice. Beside him, Monica shone like the mirror image of success, gold hair, ivory dress, diamond earrings that caught every flicker of light. When she saw me, her expression froze for half a heartbeat before she crossed the floor all grace and calculation. Mr. Callahan! It's so wonderful you could make it, she said, voice smooth as silk eyes taking inventory. I nodded. Traffic wasn't bad tonight. Ryan turned, and for a second our eyes met. His smile widened, handsome, distant, rehearsed. You look good, Dad. Better than I expected. It's been a while. It has, I said. He patted my shoulder once lightly, like sealing a transaction, then turned to a man beside him. This is my father. He used to be a programmer, back in the day. The man gave me a polite smile. I nodded, and they both turned away. I watched my son's back as he moved through the crowd, confident, fluent in a language I'd forgotten. Monica signaled to a waiter. Please seat Mr. Callahan by the window, she said, her tone gentle but firm. The view is beautiful there. She turned to me again, that polished smile still in place. I hope you enjoy yourself. I followed the waiter to a small table by the glass wall overlooking the bay. A white tablecloth, a single glass of water, an empty plate. I sat down and placed the wooden box beside me. The brass lid caught the light, glowing faintly. I opened it just enough to see the compass needle tremble, then closed it again. From where I sat, I could see Ryan talking with Gregory Northbridge. Monica's father, CEO of Northbridge Systems. His silver hair gleamed under the lights. I had shaken that same hand 15 years ago when I sold him the Neuraloop algorithm I'd spent half my life building. He'd smiled then, too, the gentle smile of a man who wins so completely he doesn't need to gloat. He'd told me the world belonged to the young, that vision needed youth to finish what age had started. Now my son stood beside him, laughing, raising his glass. Gregory beamed like a proud mentor. I watched them for a long while, the sound of their laughter weaving through the hum of the room, until it became something hollow. A woman at the next table turned toward me. Which department are you with? She asked politely. Just a guest? I said. She nodded, smiled a little too quickly, and turned away. Laughter rose again from the center table. Ryan was in the middle of a story. Monica's diamond earrings flashed as she leaned toward him. Gregory lifted his glass high. It looked almost staged, like a tableau painted to capture success before it vanished. Outside the bay was calm, the tide kissing the glass wall with quiet rhythm. I watched the ripples catch the reflection of the chandelier, tiny fragments of light floating on the surface. And somewhere in that stillness, I heard Ellen's voice again, faint and warm, telling me to be patient, that our son would one day understand. I lifted my eyes toward Ryan, standing proud beneath the lights. I wasn't sure if she was still right. I checked my watch. 10 minutes to 8. The night was just beginning. The dinner began when Gregory Northbridge rose to his feet. He lifted his glass of red wine, his voice carrying through the room like he was standing behind a conference podium instead of a dining table. He spoke of success, of youth, of boldness, and vision of 15 years of Northbridge Systems. I sat still, watching the chandelier light glint off the silver rim of his glasses. Every word was polished, practiced, and behind the smooth cadence I could almost hear the faint click of pride meeting pride. We are standing on the edge of the greatest deal in this company's history. He paused, scanning the room, a brief smile crossing his lips. This is the moment we prove Northbridge isn't a follower, it's a leader. Applause followed. Ryan laughed. Monica leaned toward him, her voice soft but sharp enough to draw blood. Technology today is a far cry from the old code of the previous generation. The room laughed. Ryan joined in, glancing my way with a smile so effortless it could almost pass for innocence. Dad used to code remember, the kind of stuff no one writes anymore. More laughter. A few looked at me curious. A few looked away, pretending not to see. I set my glass down, the cool rim pressing against my fingers. My voice came out calm, almost gentle. Old code, I said, is often the foundation for whatever you're building on now. The room went silent. Even the jazz from the speakers seemed louder for a beat. Ryan cleared his throat, turning to Gregory, steering the conversation back to safer ground. Monica shot me a glance, half surprise, half contempt. I leaned back and let the noise of the room wash over me. Numbers, projections, phrases like exponential growth and market expansion. They spoke like people who truly believed the future was already theirs. Across the table, I caught sight of Claire. She sat still, her hand gripping her water glass so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her eyes moved from Ryan to me, and in them I saw something straining to surface a truth, swallowed back. Claire had always been quiet, like her mother. But beneath that quiet was a mind that missed nothing. I gave her a small nod. She returned it barely perceptible, a wordless pact. Ryan was now talking about the company's partnership with a rising startup called Neurasync. His voice was steady, confident, rehearsed. He spoke about data compression, transmission, optimization, the brilliance of innovation. Each word made my chest tighten. I heard the name Neurasync, and in an instant I was back in 2010. Those sleepless nights in front of the screen, Neuraloop's code looping through errors, the blue light burning through fatigue, the smell of solder and coffee, the steady hum of a dream I thought would last. No one at that table knew the truth. They were laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating a triumph built on something that used to be mine, a creation I sold because I had no choice left. Gregory turned to Ryan, his tone almost fatherly. "Are you sure Neurasync fully understands the technology?" Ryan nodded quickly. "Absolutely. They confirmed everything. All ownership is under Northbridge now." "Good," Gregory said, smiling. "Then we'll announce soon." The word slid across the table like a blade, not deep enough to bleed, but sharp enough to sting. I said nothing. Just listened to the rain tapping the glass wall behind me. Once, twice, slow and cold. Monica leaned in with a bright smile. "Isn't he remarkable, Dad?" Ryan led the whole team through impossible negotiations to make this deal happen. I looked at her and nodded. "Yes, he's very good at what he does." Something in my tone made her pause. She couldn't tell if I meant it. She smiled again too quickly and turned away. Claire set her glass down, her voice quiet but clear enough to cut through the room. "That's strange. I read some internal files last week. Some of the base code signatures didn't match Northbridge's." Ryan's eyes flicked toward her, his voice suddenly clipped. "You must be mistaken, and this isn't the time to discuss work." Claire went silent, but her eyes said she wasn't wrong. I looked at them both, one child silent because she understood too much, the other laughing because he was afraid of what silence might reveal. Gregory started talking again, moving on to global expansion and investor confidence. His voice faded into the background hum. My gaze drifted past him out the window, where the dock lights scattered across the bay like counterfeit stars. A waiter refilled the glasses. Ryan raised his toward Gregory. "I believe he said technology only matters when it's commercialized, not when it's locked away by dreamers." Some people laughed. Maybe I said quietly, "But sometimes it's the dreamers who build the things others sell." No one spoke. Ryan's hand tightened around his glass before he set it down. Gregory laughed softly, and rescued the moment, changing the subject to the weather. The table relaxed, conversation resumed, but between me and them, there was a space that no sound could cross. Claire stood, whispered something to Monica, and left the room. I watched her go, her shoulders trembling slightly as she disappeared into the hallway. I knew what was happening inside her, that pull between loyalty and truth, and I feared the cost it would bring. Ryan spoke again, forcing a smile. "Dad, remember when you used to say this technology would change everything? You were right, it did. Too bad your time has passed." I smiled faintly. Maybe. But remember, everything that changes stands on something that doesn't. He didn't understand. Or maybe he chose not to. Gregory lifted his glass again. "Come now," he said cheerfully. "The past is the past. Tonight's about the future. Let's drink to the next generation, the ones unafraid to change." Glasses clinked. Laughter rose. I raised my glass of water, the light refracting through it like kissi, a glass on glass, clear and cold. Not everyone who changes is brave, I thought. Some just fear looking back long enough to see what they've lost. I checked my watch. The second hand moved steady as a pulse. I knew tonight wasn't the moment, but soon it would be. Something was coming, and when it did, they would have no choice but to listen. The party went on. And I, the quiet guest in the corner, sat watching their future rise on the ruins of my past. The air was thick with wine and congratulations. The room buzzed with talk of the company, a vision of the NeuraSync deal, soon to be signed. I sat quietly, my hands folded on the table, listening to Gregory speak with the certainty of a man who believed he was writing history. He went on about the revolutionary data compression system. Northbridge was preparing to release each word landing like a hammer strike on the walls of my memory. I didn't need to hear more. I knew exactly what they were describing. Every term, every structure he referenced Neuraloop, my Neuraloop, the one I built in 2010 when Ellen was still alive. Line by line, night after night, in that small room, trying to hold the pieces of our life together long enough to pay for her treatments. When Northbridge bought it, they promised to keep me on as a consultant. Within months, the contract was cut, the payment cleared, and the source code vanished from the system. I couldn't fight it. I needed the money. And now here it was again, reborn, renamed NeuraSync, celebrated as a triumph of innovation. I took a sip of water. The taste was bitter. Gregory's voice rose again, steady and proud. "Our new system will set the standard for data transmission. The young have proven that Northbridge's vision never grows old." He lifted his glass. The light bounced off his lenses. Ryan smiled, shaking his father-in-law's hand. Monica's gaze swept across the room, glowing with satisfaction. The words felt cold inside me. The diagrams on the screen, their proud presentation, were mine. I remembered drawing those lines 15 years ago, the logic flow I could still trace in my sleep. Only my name was missing now. The chatter faded around me, voices dipping into background noise. In my mind, I heard Harper Quinn, again the attorney I'd met last year, after discovering Northbridge was quietly refiling a patent under a different title. If they're reusing the Neuraloop framework, you still hold a claim. But let the truth appear at the right moment. Back then, I didn't fully understand. Tonight, I did. I smiled faintly, the kind that comes when fog finally lifts and everything is clear again. The right moment was coming. Ryan said something about processing speed. Monica laughed. Gregory clapped his shoulder. Their laughter filled the air like champagne bubbles, bright, brief, destined to burst. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Claire returned to her seat. Our eyes met for a second, just enough for understanding to pass between us. She knew. She had seen the same lines of code I once wrote. She knew it wasn't theirs. I gave a small nod. Wait. Not yet. A waiter placed a mousse cake in front of me and asked softly if I wanted wine. I shook my head. When he left, I stared at the flicker of the candle on the table. Something inside me felt quiet. Maybe it was peace, or maybe it was the patience of someone who had waited too long for this night. Gregory went on about the future, about partnerships with media giants. He said the word neurosync 3 more times. Each time Ryan's lips curved in that subtle smile. He thought this was his legacy, his turn to surpass his father. The speech paused when Monica stood. Her tone was bright, rehearsed. She thanked the guests, spoke about the company's journey, about their dynamic young team. Then she mentioned Ryan, the man behind this success, the one who carried forward the technological legacy of the Northbridge family. The words barely touched me. My heart felt still like the bay outside. Even the memories had been renamed. As they lifted their glasses again, I rose quietly. No one noticed. I walked to the window. Wind pressed mist against the glass, blurring the city lights. My reflection hovered there, half shadowed, half light. I remembered sitting beside Ellen's hospital bed, her frail hand gripping mine. Her voice was barely a whisper. Peter, don't lose the best part of yourself just because the world can't see it. I breathed slowly, listening to the rain. I hadn't lost anything. I was just waiting for them to dig deep enough into their own greed. Ryan appeared beside me. His tone casual, but his eyes were testing me. Pretty impressive, huh? He said. I think it's the kind of thing you'd be proud of if you were still in the game. I looked at him, smiling faintly. Impressive, yes, especially when it's rewritten from something old. He froze for half a second, then forced a laugh. You always talk in riddles, Dad. No, I said. I'm just being honest. He looked away, his expression tightening before he turned back to the crowd. His steps were quick, almost hurried. When I returned to the table, Gregory was checking his phone, face glowing with excitement. He stood abruptly, raising his glass. Neurosync just confirmed by email. The contract's signed. The press will run the story tomorrow. Applause erupted, glasses clinking. I sat down again, silent. Outside, the rain merged with the sound of waves, a slow, steady rhythm. Around me, faces shimmered in the golden light, drunk on success, blind to what had already begun. I slipped a hand into my inner pocket, feeling the folded paper Harper had sent 2 weeks ago. A temporary notice from the patent office. Investigation in progress, suspected source code infringement traced to the original Neuraloop patent 2010. I hadn't told anyone. I closed my eyes. The wind outside struck the window pane sharp and clean. Ellen had been right. Some battles don't need shouting. They just need timing. When I opened my eyes again, the city lights shimmered across the bay. The rain had stopped. The water was still. And I knew the night had only just begun. The light in the banquet hall dimmed as the last guests drifted away. I stayed seated for a while, watching the reflection of the chandelier ripple across the surface of my half-empty glass, then set it down. The quiet brought everything back, the night 15 years ago, when it all began. I could almost hear the soft clatter of the old keyboard and Ellen's coughing echoing from the bedroom down the hall. In 2010, I was 38, newly unemployed, after a software project in Portland collapsed under budget cuts. I took what was left of my savings and rented a small office on the third floor of an old brick building near the University of Washington. I hung a hand-painted sign by the door, Neuraloop Technologies. It sounded naive, maybe even clumsy, but I believed in it, a neural loop learning and adapting like the human brain itself. I wrote the first lines of code on a second-hand computer I'd bought from an old university lab. I remember those autumn nights clearly, the stale coffee, the hum of rain on the tin roof, the blue glow of the monitor on my hands. I kept thinking that if I could just make this work, if I could make data move faster, smarter, I could change something in the world. Ellen would bring me coffee, drape a scarf over my shoulders, tell me I should sleep. I'd joke that I'd rest when the world learned to read thoughts. She'd laugh softly, touch my shoulder, and leave without another word. A year later, Neuraloop was running well enough to attract a few small clients. The compression algorithm I built could reduce data size by 30% without losing accuracy. It felt like a breakthrough. I knew Northbridge Systems had noticed. They sent people to watch my demo, praised my work, promised collaboration. I thought I was finally standing on the edge of something big. Then, in November, Ellen collapsed. Ovarian cancer. Stage 3. The doctors said there wasn't much time. I remember the sound of shoes on hospital floors, the sharp smell of disinfectant, the number on the first bill, $70,000. That night, I sat alone in the hallway, holding that paper hearing Ellen call my name from the room down the hall. The next morning, I went back to the office, turned on the monitor, and watched the lines of code run across the screen. All of it suddenly felt meaningless. I didn't need innovation. I needed money. 3 days later, I met a Northbridge representative at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. A young man named Mark Dillard. He carried a folder thick with paperwork. The offer was straightforward $60,000 for full ownership, source code, training models, intellectual property, everything. They promised to acknowledge my contribution in internal documents and possibly retain me as a consultant. I asked if they could give me a week. He said if I waited, they'd buy something else. I signed that same day. My hand was shaking so hard the ink bled on the page. I didn't read the fine print. I just remember his final words as he stood to leave. Mr. Callahan, you probably just saved someone's life, and maybe a company too. I brought the check to the hospital. Ellen didn't ask where the money came from. She just held my hand and said, it'll be all right. 3 months later, she was gone quietly in the middle of a winter night like wind slipping through the curtains. After the funeral, I went back to the office, stared at the empty desk, the faint coffee ring on the corner, the fading logo on the wall. I shut it all down, returned the keys, went back to freelance work. I never tried to rebuild Neuraloop. Not until April of 2024. That morning, someone knocked on my door. A woman, brown hair, long coat, carrying a leather case. She introduced herself as Harper Quinn, intellectual property attorney. I didn't recognize her name, but her voice had that clear, steady confidence lawyers are trained to have. She told me Northbridge was selling a data compression technology to Neurasync, and during a patent review, she found that its core algorithm matched 80% of the Neuraloop code I had registered temporarily under my name in 2010. I couldn't even speak. Harper opened her case, pulled out a copy of the old contract, the one I'd signed in that coffee shop years ago. The phrase acknowledgement of contribution had been quietly removed from the internal version filed in 2011. She said if you reassign the copyright properly, Neurasync could list you as the original creator. I asked, "You mean I could reclaim the patent?" She nodded, then added softly, "Only if you're willing to fight." I remember looking out the window. Snow still fell that morning. I thought of Ellen, of Ryan, of the way I had spent my life avoiding conflict. I said I don't want to fight. I just want the truth. Harper studied me for a long moment, then said, "Sometimes the truth is the most beautiful victory there is." That sentence stayed with me for months. I didn't sign right away. I sent her back the old documents and told her I needed time. Harper didn't press. She only said, "Wait for the right moment. They'll bring justice to themselves." Now, sitting here in this glowing banquet hall, I finally understood what she meant. Truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be seen. Northbridge believed they had bought everything. They forgot one thing: their greatest pride was still built on the work I created. And Neurasync was beginning to notice. I remembered the last day at my old office when I took the Neuraloop sign down from the door. On the back of the wood, I had carved 4 small words. Only I knew. Wait for the return. I looked around the room now, its light, soft, and fading. Ryan was still shaking hands, Monica laughing at someone's joke. Everyone thought tonight was the beginning of their triumph. They were right, just not in the way they believed. I stood, put on my coat, thanked a waiter, and stepped outside. The wind off the bay was cold, carrying the taste of salt and steel. I walked slowly along the wet sidewalk, streetlights spilling across the puddles like shards of broken glass. Seattle at night smelled of the ocean and machinery, something human and endless. I reached into my inner pocket, feeling the folded paper Harper had sent 2 weeks ago, the temporary confirmation from the patent office that an investigation into the Neuraloop algorithm was underway. I hadn't told anyone, not yet. The wind picked up, striking the window panes above me with a hollow rhythm. Ellen's voice came back to me, faint, but steady. Some battles don't need shouting. They just need time. I lifted my head toward the dark sky. The rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered across the bay like quiet fire. Tomorrow would come, and for the first time in 15 years, I wouldn't stay silent. A week before the dinner, I heard a car pull up outside. When I opened the door, Claire was standing in the fading light, a brown trench coat wrapped tight around her, a stack of papers clutched in her arms. Her face was tense, her eyes unsettled. She said just one sentence. "Dad, you need to see this." We went into the kitchen. I poured 2 cups of coffee. She opened her laptop, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed the password. The screen lit up with a chain of internal emails. One subject line froze me where I sat. Update branding remove, P. Callahan from Legacy Reference. Beneath it, Monica's signature. Claire pointed at the bolded text. "They're preparing to announce Neurasync as a full in-house innovation from Northbridge. No other names in the archive. I checked the system. They're erasing you from the history, Dad, completely." I touched the rim of my cup, watching the reflection of the kitchen light tremble in the coffee. "Of course," I said quietly. "When the truth can't be controlled, people try to erase it." Her voice broke a little. "I can't let them do that. I checked the old servers. There are still traces of your programming signature. But if they clean the logs, it's gone forever. Monica's ordering the data purge herself." I was calmer than she expected. Maybe because I'd grown used to being written out of other people's stories. "No one can erase something built with real sweat," I said. "Just keep what you found. Don't do anything foolish." Claire sat down, hands knotted together. "I'm scared Ryan will find out. He'll say I betrayed the family." "No," I said. "You're not betraying anyone. You're protecting what's true." Outside, the wind from the bay pushed against the windows, carrying the smell of salt and rain. The sky had gone heavy and gray, swallowing the last bit of daylight over Seattle. Then came the sound of small footsteps on the stairs. Sophie, my granddaughter, ran down, her brown curls loose around her shoulders, clutching her old doll. She looked at me wide-eyed. "Grandpa, I heard Uncle Ryan say you're poor. Is that true?" Claire's eyes darted to mine. The question hung there innocent and sharp. I placed my hand gently on Sophie's head. "No, sweetheart. Poor is what happens when you lose respect for yourself, not when you run out of money." She tilted her head, thinking hard, then nodded as if she'd just learned something that made sense. She climbed into the chair beside me, fidgeting with the button on my coat. "Are you sad, Grandpa?" "If they forget about you." I looked out the window. The wind had picked up scattering dry leaves across the yard. "No," I said softly. "Some things don't need to be remembered. It's enough that they exist." Claire's eyes glistened, her voice barely steady. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have told you sooner. They're using your work and pretending it's theirs." I motioned for her to sit. From the drawer, I pulled out a small wooden box and lifted the lid. Inside was a faded contract from 2010, the ink smudged, but the line at the bottom still legible. P. Callahan, founder, Neuraloop Technologies. I slid it toward her. "Keep this. If anything happens, take it to Harper." Claire held the paper, her hand trembling. "You trust that lawyer?" I nodded. "She's the only one who never asked how much it's worth." The kitchen fell quiet. The clock ticked softly. Wind whispered through the cracks in the door. Sophie sat beside me, doodling on a scrap of paper. I glanced down. It was a small house with 3 figures inside. "What are you drawing, honey? Our house," she said. "With Mommy and Daddy in it. I want everyone to live close again." I smiled, a small one, the kind that comes when light manages to slip into a dark day. She didn't know it, but she'd just said the one thing adults never seem to manage. Claire stood closing her laptop. "I won't let them get away with this," she said. "But Dad, if this goes public, Ryan will hate me." "Ryan's already chosen his path," I told her. "You're choosing yours. Don't be afraid of being hated. Be afraid of not being able to look yourself in the mirror." She bit her lip, nodded slightly. By the time she left, the sky had turned darker, the rain just beginning to fall. I walked them to the car. The wind had picked up, spraying salt from the bay into the air. Before getting in, Claire turned to me. "If they find out I told you, they could fire me." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Some losses are worth taking. Don't be afraid of the truth." Sophie climbed into the back seat and waved through the window. "Grandpa, next time, tell me the story about the dreamer. Okay?" I smiled and waved back. "All right, but promise me you'll remember this. The dreamer is never poor." The car rolled away, its taillights glowing faintly through the rain until they vanished down the curve of the street. I stood under the porch roof, listening to the engine fade. My chest heavy, but calm. Inside the kitchen still smelled of cold coffee. The old contract lay on the table, its edges curled, the paper yellowed with time. I folded it gently, placed it back into the wooden box. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window looking out at the Puget Sound, wrapped in fog. The water shimmered under a thin layer of moonlight, a mirror between the past and the present. I knew Claire had just stepped into danger. But she'd done what I never had, the brave thing. Close to midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Harper. "Mr. Callahan, we need to meet soon." Neurasync's internal audit found something unusual in the source code. I read the message twice, then looked out the window. The rain had stopped, leaving only mist hanging over the water. I exhaled slowly. The moment Harper had spoken of, the right moment was coming. And it was closer than ever. The private banquet room overlooking the bay shimmered like a stage. Low chandeliers bathed the white tablecloths in gold, reflecting off wine glasses and confident faces. the sound of clinking glassware mixed with soft jazz and the scent of butter and grilled shellfish. I arrived a little late. My seat, always the same one, was near the window, a polite distance from the center of attention. Ryan stood in the middle of the crowd, champagne in hand, his other arm sketching invisible arcs in the air like he was conducting a map only he could see. He spoke about Northbridge Systems, about Progress Youth, the 400 employees shaping the future. Every few lines, the audience responded on cue with a murmur of awe. Monica stood beside him, smiling sharp and deliberate, the kind of smile that could draw blood without leaving a mark. Then Gregory Northbridge stepped forward, lifting his glass, his voice rich with pride. "The partnership with Neurasync will put Northbridge on the global map. Tonight we toast to intelligence and courage." Applause burst like released pressure. Ryan turned clinking glasses with his father-in-law eyes gleaming. I lifted my water glass and took a sip. Across the room, Claire sat quietly on the far side of the table, wearing a simple blue dress, her hair tied back. Her face was calm, but her hands were locked together under the table. Our eyes met for a brief second, enough for me to know she remembered the emails, the deletion orders, the plan to erase my name from history. A silver-haired investor leaned toward Ryan, asking about the algorithm's core. Ryan gave the answer they wanted, confident, forward-looking, full of buzzwords. Then Monica spoke, voice smooth as silk. "Ryan's father used to work at the post office," she said lightly. "I doubt he even knows what cloud computing really is." The table erupted in laughter, crisp, hollow, like glass breaking. I set my glass down, fingers resting on its rim. "Maybe I don't understand your clouds," I said evenly, "but I do know where the rain falls." The laughter stopped. The air tightened. Gregory cleared his throat. Ryan blinked. Monica's lips pressed together. Claire leaned forward slightly, a flicker of pride and pain crossing her eyes. She looked around as if afraid that a single word might set the whole room on fire. Then a young executive spoke up, asking Monica about the marketing rollout. She smiled again, perfectly composed, and started listing dates, press releases, live stream schedules. Her voice glittered with rehearsed excitement. Gregory nodded. Ryan smirked with satisfaction. I listened, but my mind wandered back years ago to the nights Ellen would bring me coffee and scold me for not sleeping. To the old window streaked with moss, to the line of code that finally worked after weeks of failure. That moment, pure, silent, earned, was something no one here could ever steal. In the center of the room, Ryan launched into another story about late nights and breakthroughs. Monica added jokes. The crowd laughed again. Someone asked Gregory about the Asian market. His answer clanged like polished metal, confident, rehearsed. Then Claire quietly set down her utensils. She dabbed her hands on her napkin, stood, and whispered as she passed behind me. "Dad, I'm going out for some air." I nodded. She slipped toward the sliding doors that opened onto the balcony. Ryan made his rounds and stopped beside me. He leaned in, smiling. "Want to meet a few of the major investors, Dad." "Great opportunity." I looked at him. Opportunity for what? To hear another story about clouds and a generation that knows everything. His smile faltered. He patted my shoulder awkwardly. "I just want you to enjoy yourself." "I am," I said quietly. Completely. Monica approached posture. Straight eyes bright. She bent slightly, voice low. "Mr. Callahan, don't misunderstand what I said earlier. Everyone at the company respects the pioneers who came before us, but the world moves fast." I met her gaze. "No need to apologize or explain. Just tell the truth." She blinked just once. The truth is what we've built has already been validated by the market. I nodded. Then let the market finish the conversation tomorrow morning. Something flickered in her eyes, something sharp and uncertain, before she smiled and turned away. I rose and walked onto the balcony. The cold air hit like a slap, carrying salt and the faint trace of rain. Claire stood at the glass railing, staring down at the water. I joined her without a word. We didn't need them any more words. We understood each other through silence. "I'm scared," she said softly. "Good," I answered. "That's how you know the storm's close. Just don't let it steer you." She turned to me, her jaw tight, then nodded. "I've backed everything up. I just don't want anyone to get hurt." I almost smiled. No one walks through truth without getting wet. We went back inside. The music had shifted to a slower saxophone tune. Gregory stood at the screen again, pointing at a rising green graph labeled Neurosync. Tomorrow, he said, we redefine our place in the world. A few whispered words about stock bonuses followed. Ryan lifted his glass high. To tomorrow. To the sleepless nights. To the ones who dared to lead. The crystal clinked, sharp as hail. I raised my glass of water, holding it to eye level. My reflection broke into fragments across its trembling surface. Photographers from an industry magazine had arrived late. Cameras clicked, capturing smiles, moments of triumph. One lens swept past me, paused for half a second, then moved on, just an old shadow in the corner of someone else's victory. Monica brought a few partners over, introduced us quickly. They shook my hand, their eyes scanning my face like scanning a barcode, searching for something worth noting. Finding nothing, they drifted off, leaving behind the faint sting of expensive cologne. I was about to sit down when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A short message from Harper. "They've set the schedule. Stay calm. Let them finish their night." I slipped the phone away. Somewhere inside, a mechanism clicked into place. Ryan took the stage again, telling the polished version of Northbridge's founding story. The room swayed to the rhythm of his voice, a lullaby of victory. I checked my watch. The minute hand moved like slow sand. When I looked up, Claire was watching me, her eyes steady, unwavering. She nodded once. I returned it. At the center table, Gregory was recounting near failures and last-minute triumphs. Ryan embellished, Monica scrolled through her phone, coordinating tomorrow's media rollout. Everything ran with the smoothness of power until a phone buzzed louder than it should have been. A man fumbled to silence it, but others were already glancing down at their screens. The air shifted. A ripple of breath passed through the room. Ryan kept talking, oblivious. Gregory laughed, signaling for brighter lights. Monica froze, staring at her phone. Claire's hands tightened on the edge of the table. I sat still, listening to the rhythm beneath the music, the shuffle of shoes, the hush of realization. Something was turning deep under the surface, like a current beneath ice. I set my spoon down, lifted my gaze to the corner screen where a muted financial channel scrolled headlines in red. The ticker began to change letters, flickering faster. Someone gasped. Gregory turned his head. Ryan stopped mid-sentence, his hand frozen in mid-air. Monica's phone slipped slightly in her grip. Claire leaned forward, her face pale, but certain. I leaned back, exhaled slowly, and waited. Outside, the Puget Sound had darkened another shade, as if the water itself understood the storm had finally reached the shore. The music stopped mid-bar, as if someone had cut the power. A faint click echoed from the corner of the room, and the giant screen on the far wall flickered to life. The logo of Seattle News Channel appeared, then came the anchor's voice, steady, precise, and cold as steel. Breaking news from Seattle. Neurasync has just announced an $8.5 million acquisition of the Neuraloop data compression algorithm, originally developed in 2010 by engineer Peter Callahan. The U.S. Department of Commerce has confirmed that ownership rights have been restored to Mr. Callahan following the completion of legal review. Northbridge Systems is currently under federal investigation for unauthorized use of source code without proper attribution. No one moved. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the windows, a hollow sound that sliced straight through the room. I looked around the table. Gregory stood frozen, fingers clenched around a glass of wine that hadn't reached his lips. Monica's hand slipped, her glass hit the table with a soft, brittle chime. Ryan's head dropped, his shoulders locked tight. His throat moved as he swallowed hard. The room was suddenly full of people, and utterly empty all at once. A few guests looked at me. Others looked at Gregory as if waiting for someone to say something, anything that would make the world go back to normal. No one did. Only the television kept talking flat, merciless, unblinking. My heartbeat slowed until I could feel each pulse deliberate and heavy, sinking with the distant rain. On screen, the image shifted. An old photo appeared. The Neuraloop logo. The wooden sign I once hung on the door of my first office. The corner still chipped, the paint peeling. Below it, the caption read, "Core Technology, originally developed by engineer Peter Callahan, acquired by Neurasync for global application development." Gregory was the first to find his voice. It came out raw, frayed. "What the hell is this? Is this some kind of mistake?" He turned toward Monica, but she was pale, staring at the screen, fingers gripping her phone so tightly it might shatter. Ryan lifted his head, his voice trembling. "Dad, did you do this?" I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed on the screen where Harper Quinn appeared in front of the Department of Commerce building, calm and composed as ever. "We've provided evidence proving that the Neuraloop source code was written by Peter Callahan in 2010, she said. More than 80% of Northbridge's internal systems matched his original dataset. Under federal law, authorship and ownership have now been restored." Someone gasped. A woman at the next table covered her mouth. The whisper spread like static. "Callahan. Is that Ryan's father?" Gregory straightened, his face red fury, pushing blood to the surface. "This is false," he roared. "A procedural error. I'll call our attorneys. This is nonsense." But before the echo of his voice faded, the broadcast cut to a reporter standing in front of Northbridge's headquarters, announcing that regulators had already confirmed a preliminary investigation. Ryan turned to me again, voice breaking. "You planned this to humiliate me." I looked at him steady. "No. I only planned to return what was taken." He inhaled sharply but said nothing. Monica sank into her chair, pressing her palms against her forehead. Her voice was thin, almost inaudible. Years of brand building. For this, because of him behind us, the low murmur of voices thickened. A young investor whispered to his colleague, "I remember seeing the words Callahan prototype in the archive." The sentence was soft, but loud enough for Gregory to hear. He slammed his palm onto the table. The sound cracked through the silence. "No one leaves this room," he barked. "Not until I understand what's going on." I set my glass down gently. Perhaps I said quietly, "It's time we finish dinner," in silence. The words hung there heavy and sharp. No one breathed too loud. Only the TV continued its detached monologue, now reporting that Northbridge stock had dropped 3% in under 10 minutes. From the far end of the table, Claire began walking toward me, her face calm, her eyes steady. She didn't look at anyone else, just at me. And in that look was something pure, quiet pride that outshone every chandelier in the room. Gregory spun toward Ryan, shouting, "How long have you known about this?" Ryan shook his head mute. Monica cut in, her voice pitched high. "Did your father talk to Nura Singh before the dinner?" "They only spoke to the truth," I said. "And truth doesn't ask for permission." A few guests stood gathering their coats. The elegance of the evening cracked apart like glass underfoot. Faces once full of power and certainty turned pale, calculating. Each of them silently measuring how much this revelation might cost them. Gregory collapsed into his chair, head in his hands, mumbling. "This can't be. We signed everything. It's impossible." Ryan stayed standing, eyes locked on me. Anger, fear, and something else I couldn't quite name flickering behind them. I stood too, pushing my chair back softly so it wouldn't scrape. "I didn't come here to bring anyone down," I said. "Only to remind you what everything here was built on." Then I turned toward the waiter frozen in the corner. "Could I have a little more water, please?" He nodded quickly, hands shaking as he hurried away. I sat back down, exhaled, and felt the cold air from the window slip across my skin. Everything was unfolding exactly as Harper had said it would. Truth doesn't need volume, only timing. Claire took the seat beside me, her hand finding mine a quiet squeeze. I didn't speak, just nodded. In that moment, amid the thick silence, I knew the balance had shifted. The broadcast continued. "Northbridge Systems will suspend trading pending formal investigation," the anchor read. My name appeared on screen beneath the headline, "Original Inventor Peter Callahan." Monica rose abruptly, her heels striking the wood floor like hammer blows as she stormed out. Gregory stayed seated, hollow-eyed. Ryan stared at nothing. Claire turned to me, her voice a whisper. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" I smiled faintly. "Just the weather, sweetheart," I said. The rain stopped, so the clouds had to break. Gregory shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. He yanked his phone from his jacket, pressed it to his ear, and strode toward the hallway. The glass door closed behind him, leaving a heavy stillness thick as ash. Inside, no one spoke. People just looked at one another, unsure what the script was now that the lights had gone out. Ryan turned to me. His face had gone pale under the yellow light, a thin sheen of sweat glinting on his forehead. "Dad, why would you do this?" I didn't turn. My voice was calm. I didn't do anything. I only took back what was mine. He exhaled sharply like someone drowning for air, his hands clenching. "You just destroyed everything." I met his eyes. If a building's foundation is stolen, it was never standing. It only looked that way. He looked down, unable to respond. Monica stepped in, her voice shaking, but forced steady. "Mr. Callahan, maybe there's still a way to fix this. We can rebrand, shift the story. People forget fast. The news cycle always moves on." I turned toward her. Her eyes were still sharp, but her smile had cracked at the edges. "No one rebuilds on contempt. If you want to forget, start by living better." She froze gaze, dropping fingertips grazing the rim of her glass as if searching for something solid to hold on to. No one else spoke. The TV kept looping the same footage, reporters crowding the Northbridge headquarters. Then Gregory came back in. His face was gray, his body rigid. He placed his phone on the table and sank into his chair. His voice came out hoarse, caught somewhere between rage and defeat. They froze every corporate account. The Department of Commerce is handing temporary control to the audit board. Ryan stood motionless, gripping the edge of the table. "What about me?" he said. "I led the project. Dad say something?" Gregory looked at him. The arrogance was gone. Only fatigue remained. "It's all slipping, son. Watching them." I didn't feel triumph, just a dull ache. Victories built on ruin never taste sweet, even when justice is served. But honor once buried can't breathe without light. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket. A message from Harper. "Congratulations. The patent reinstatement is official. The registry now lists you as the legal owner of Neuraloop. All supporting documents are public. I read it once, then locked the screen. I didn't need to say a word." Gregory grabbed his wine glass and drained it in one long swallow. Red streaked down his chin and collar. He slammed the glass against the table, shards scattered like frost. "Fine, Callahan," he rasped. "You wanted your honor. You've got it, but you dragged your family down with you." I spoke slowly, quietly. "Honor doesn't drag people down. It just puts them where they truly stand." Ryan slammed his palm on the table, his voice cracking. "Do you even realize how humiliating this is for me? The whole company's talking about it, about you. How do you think they'll look at me now?" I looked at him, his face clouded, torn between anger and something that looked a lot like shame. "I didn't do this to humiliate you," I said. "I did it to remind you truth never robs a man of respect. Only lies do that." Monica bowed her head. A tear slipped, landing on the linen like a raindrop. "We can rebuild," she whispered. "Neurasync will still partner with us, if you agree." "No one rebuilds without first admitting what they broke," I said. Across the table, Claire's eyes met mine. Warm, sad, understanding. She knew this wasn't victory. It was peace. Gregory picked up his phone again, muttered into it, voice low and sharp, then walked out without another glance. Monica watched him go, then turned to Ryan, her face hollow. Ryan dropped back into his chair like someone who'd run out of breath. "I don't understand you," he said quietly. "You stayed silent all these years. Why now? Why tonight?" "Because tonight I said people were finally listening." That stopped him. His eyes lifted, blurred by something he didn't want to name. A waiter approached, trembling, and set down a fresh pitcher of water. I thanked him. The clear liquid caught the overhead light, scattering it into shards. I turned the glass slowly, my warped reflection rippling inside it, and I thought of Ellen, her hand in mine, on that final night in the hospital. Her voice faint but steady. "Don't be afraid to lose your name, Peter. Be afraid to lose faith in it." A man at the far end of the room cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said softly. "I think we should go." He spoke with the politeness of someone desperate to leave without running. Chairs scraped against the wood floor, a long metallic whisper. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, stirring the curtains. One by one they slipped out, leaving only 4 of us, me, Ryan, Monica, and Claire. Monica spoke first, her voice barely audible. "What more do you want?" "You already have everything. I don't want anything," I said. "I just want what's right to have its name again." Ryan looked over, voice breaking to a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you." "I'm not asking you to," I said. "Forgiveness belongs to those who know when to stop." Claire walked over and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "That's enough, Dad. Let them find their own way back." I nodded. Yes, let them. The room was still, the air thick with salt and wine. I reached for my coat. Ryan looked up like he wanted to speak, but didn't. I walked toward the door. The hallway lights stretched long and empty ahead of me. Behind me, the TV carried on its voice calm, impersonal reporting the rare reinstatement of intellectual property rights in Seattle. I moved slowly, my fingers brushing the phone in my pocket. There was another message from Harper waiting. I didn't need to open it. I already knew what it said because the words were already echoing inside me, steady as a heartbeat. Honor doesn't need to be returned. It only needs to be heard. And tonight it finally was. Seattle woke damp and gray, as if the whole city had just shaken off a bad dream. I brewed coffee and leaned against the kitchen doorway, watching Puget Sound dissolve into a thin sheet of fog. The phone on the table kept vibrating, notifications piling up like rain tapping a metal roof. I didn't rush to answer. I waited for the coffee's warmth to rise bitter and grounding before sitting down and touching the screen. The first thing that met me were headlines spreading like wildfire across social media. Clips from last night's news broadcast were everywhere. A freeze frame of my name beneath the words "Original Inventor" had been spliced next to a stock chart showing Northbridge in freefall. Comments rolled in like surf people talking about ethics in tech, about forgotten pioneers, about the cost of arrogance. Someone dug up an old photo of the Neuraloop wooden sign. Someone else said they remembered seeing my name in an internal memo from 2011. The phone buzzed again. Claire. Her voice trembled between relief and exhaustion. Dad, I just got out of an emergency board meeting. They've suspended Ryan pending investigation. Monica's been stripped of her PR access. Gregory's been summoned by the Intellectual Property Commission this afternoon. Her breathing came fast, steady, but fragile. You okay? I asked. A pause. Then softly, I'm fine. Just sad for people who could have chosen better. I said, people rarely choose better when they think they won't have to pay for it. Stay calm. Do your part. She hesitated. There's one more thing. The papers are calling you the quiet genius of Seattle. I laughed, just a breath against the rim of my cup. You see, sweetheart, sometimes silence is the loudest sound there is. When the call ended, I looked back out the window. The water stayed gray, restless, but calm. On the table, a small envelope sat in the mailbox tray. Sophie must have slipped it through the door earlier. I opened it carefully. Inside, on lined paper, in a child's soft, slanted handwriting. Dear Grandpa, I'm proud you didn't shout, but still won. I'll come tomorrow. Please make cocoa for me. I set the note down, the blue ink warming something deep inside. In all the noise of the world, sometimes it's only the smallest words that can steady a heart. The phone buzzed again, an unfamiliar number. A journalist asking for a live interview. I'm sorry, I said quietly. There's nothing to add. The truth already spoke. They pressed on the quiet genius nickname was trending. People wanted to hear about my comeback. I'm not a comeback story, I told them. Just a name finding its way back to the right line of text. They congratulated me, then hung up. I silenced the phone and set it face down on the wooden table. The grain lines curved like the rings of a tree time made visible. The flood of news kept coming. Northbridge opened the market day in a nosedive. Financial anchors called it one of the sharpest drops in company history. Analysts debated legal exposure, contract breaches, software plagiarism. Think pieces appeared within hours, some explaining the Neuraloop algorithm with diagrams more polished than anything I could have afforded 15 years ago. I watched for a while, then closed my eyes, letting the words pass like a train I'd missed long ago but no longer needed to catch. Another call came, Harvard Tech Review. I let it ring out. Then an email appeared from Harper, a link to the official Federal Patent Registry. My name at the top, followed by a short note. Everything's finalized. You can breathe now. I started to type a reply, thank you, but deleted it and wrote two simpler words instead. I know. By noon, the rain had returned, tapping softly on the porch roof like a quiet refrain. I made cocoa and poured myself a cup. The old radio on the counter hummed with jazz, the saxophone low and wavering. Between songs, a news bulletin cut in the Intellectual Property Commission has confirmed a hearing with Northbridge executives later today. 3 names read aloud, one after another. I turned the radio off. The house settled back into its silence. Silence isn't lonely when you know exactly where you stand. A knock came 2 gentle taps. Claire stood on the porch rain in her hair holding a food container. She stepped inside, setting it on the counter. The smell of chicken soup filled the room. "Passed by the market," she said. "Figured you wouldn't cook." "You guessed right." I smiled. She ladled out 2 bowls, slid one toward me. "Spent all morning replying to emails. Everyone wants interviews with you." I told them no. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced, frowned, and set it face down. "Ryan's been officially suspended. They revoked his badge and had legal escort him to clear his desk." I lowered my spoon. "Did he say anything?" She looked down at her bowl. "He asked me one thing, why?" I didn't answer, because my answer isn't the one he wanted. I nodded. Sometimes people ask, why, just to hear an excuse. By late afternoon, the sky began to clear. Sunlight spilled through torn clouds, laying gold across the bay like a slow-moving curtain. I stepped onto the porch. Down the street, children were laughing, running in puddles. Small footsteps pattered up the path. Sophie appeared, blue raincoat, whale pattern umbrella in hand. She looked up, eyes bright. "Grandpa? I saw your name on TV at my friend's house. I told her my grandpa's the smartest, quiet person ever." I crouched down so we were eye level, brushed the raindrops from her hair. "I'm not quiet, kiddo," I said. "I just speak when it matters." She smiled. "Then I'll learn that too." The phone lit up again, Ryan's name. Just one line in the message, "I want to see you." I stood still, listening to the slow gurgle of the kitchen sink, the sound of water steady and sure. In my mind, he was a boy again, hands gripping the handlebars of his bike, chin scraped from a fall, eyes wet, but waiting for me to steady him. I typed back, "Tomorrow. 7 p.m. The cafe by the pier. Come alone." The message sent. I exhaled slow and long, like dropping a stone into deep water, and finally hearing it hit the bottom. Night came clean and clear. The stars drifted out, scattered and patient. I unfolded Sophie's letter again, tracing her crooked handwriting. "You didn't shout, but still won." I smiled. And in the quiet between 2 breaths, I could almost hear Ellen's voice from the porch, soft, patient, telling me to stay slow, to never let someone else's anger decide my pace. I went inside, turning off the lights one by one, leaving only the small lamp by the window. My hand lingered on the doorknob. Outside, the sound breathed evenly, the tide steady against the shore. I closed the door gently, letting the night keep the rest of the story until tomorrow. Morning came to Puget Sound, clear and cold, the sunlight thin, threading through the fog like gauze. I made coffee, the soft hum of the machine filling the quiet kitchen. The smell drifted through the house, blending with the faint scent of wet wood left behind by last night's rain. I opened the window. A chill wind swept in, carrying the distant murmur of waves and the faint cry of gulls. Today, the air had the scent of beginnings. But I knew something was coming. When the knock came, I wasn't surprised. 3 slow taps, hesitant, like someone gathering courage. I opened the door. Ryan stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes ringed in gray, his hair disheveled, his suit wrinkled as if he'd slept in it or hadn't slept at all. He stared at me for a long moment before speaking. His voice was low, hoarse. "Dad, I was wrong." I stepped aside. He entered quietly. The morning light fell through the windows, catching motes of dust that hung suspended like slow snow. I poured him a cup of coffee, set it in front of him. He didn't touch it. Just sat there, hands gripping the edge of the chair, eyes down. "I never meant to hurt you," he said finally. "I just wanted to be seen." The words dropped heavy, sinking between us like a stone in still water. No splash, just depth. I sat opposite him, my palms flat on the table. "You were seen, Ryan. Just not in the way you hoped. Respect doesn't come from a title on a door or a nameplate on a desk. It comes from how a man acts and how he keeps his word when no one's watching." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I don't know when everything slipped away. I thought if I landed one more deal, if I made the company bigger, you'd finally be proud." I said, "You don't have to prove anything to me. The only thing I ever wanted was for you to understand that real worth doesn't live in someone else's hands." He was silent. The old wall clock ticked long, patient beats. Outside, a cargo ship moved slowly from the pier, its horn trailing across the water, a low note that faded into fog. There was something breaking inside his eyes, like a man who'd been lost too long and suddenly recognized the road home. "Monica's being torn apart in the media," he said quietly. "They found everything, the fake records, the erased credits. She's lost it all. And me, I just feel empty." I nodded. "What's happening isn't punishment, son. It's consequence. People only ever reap what they sow." He bowed his head, voice small. "I know. I just wish I'd understood sooner." The phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it, an email from Harper. Subject line: court confirmation. Neuraloop sole ownership granted. I read it once, each word landing clean, final, then closed the screen. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet stillness spreading through my chest. I stood and walked to the window. The light was stronger now, the sun climbing above the distant rooftops. Behind me, Ryan stayed seated, fingers locked together, afraid to let go. "Ryan," I said softly, "I know you grew up in a world where the loudest voice wins, where success is measured in numbers. But in the end, only two things keep a man standing: truth and self-respect." He inhaled, lifted his head. "I want to start over. Do you think that's possible?" Starting over doesn't mean erasing everything I said. It means carrying forward what you've learned. Don't apologize for the past, just do right by what's left. He nodded slowly, then glanced around the room. "I remember that chair," he said, pointing. "When I was a kid, I'd sit there watching you write code till midnight." I smiled. "I remember. You used to say code was magic." A faint laugh escaped him. "Maybe I forgot that for too long." I stepped closer, placed a hand on his shoulder. "No one really forgets. They just pretend so it's easier to sleep. You may not rebuild the company, but you can rebuild yourself." His eyes blurred again. "Thank you, Dad." He turned toward the door, paused, looking out toward the bay. The wind lifted a few strands of hair from his forehead. "I won't let anyone rewrite my story again," he said. "Good," I answered. "Just make sure you write it in truth." The door closed softly behind him. The room filled again with the sound of wood settling, the faint trace of wind. I sat at the table, printed Harper's email, folded it neatly, and placed it inside the wooden box next to Sophie's letter. 3 pieces of paper. 3 moments. Each saying the same thing: truth doesn't need to argue, it only needs to endure. I stepped out onto the porch. Morning light spread across the water, dazzling. Each glint on the bay looked like a line of code I'd once written, small, precise, forming order out of chaos. A gull skimmed the surface, its wings brushing the waves. And I thought of Ellen, her voice the night before she left. Real justice isn't about winning or losing, Peter. It's when everything finds its rightful place. I understood now. It wasn't advice for courtrooms. It was for the soul. The phone buzzed again. A new message from Harper. "It's done. You can rest now." I stared at the screen a moment, then switched it off. Outside the bay was brightening, reflecting a sky scrubbed clean. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind, the tide, the faint stir of a city waking. Justice, like the wind, doesn't come to destroy. It comes to clear the air. And this morning, Puget Sound was clearer, quieter, as if even the sea itself had finally exhaled after the storm. A few weeks later, Seattle had changed clothes. The endless rain had finally stopped, as if the sky had finished washing away its own guilt. What remained were mornings so clear they almost hurt the eyes. Sunlight draped over the maple leaves, soft and pale as linen. I drove my old car along the road that hugged the bay, where rows of sailboats floated motionless in the calm water. I stopped at a small bookstore on the corner of Ballard Avenue. The wooden sign above the door still read Eleanor's Pages. The paint had faded, but the scent of cedar lingered, a trace of something that refused to leave. The bell over the door chimed as I stepped in. Old paper, coffee, the faint spice of dried cinnamon Eleanor used to keep the damp away. She stood behind the counter, hair silver and tied neatly, arranging a stack of new arrivals. When she saw me, her face lit up behind her round glasses. "Mr. Callahan," she said, smiling. "I thought you'd decided never to leave that house by the bay again." I chuckled, the kind of laugh that no longer needed to defend itself. "Maybe I'm learning how to live on ordinary days again." She set down the books and came closer. "And how does it feel now?" I glanced around the shop where morning light slanted through the dusty window panes, laying soft lines across the spines of worn books. "Light," I said. "I didn't win anything. I just stopped letting people trample what's right." Eleanor studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you're still the same man you were back then," she said. "Only now you don't have to bow your head anymore." I sat at the wooden table by the window, the same spot where she and I once talked about the idea that became Neuraloop. Back then, I was young enough to believe that a line of code could change the world. Now I only believe that an honest one can keep the world from losing its way. The door swung open, and the quick patter of small feet crossed the floor. Sophie came running in shoes, dusty hair, wind-blown, holding a folded newspaper like a trophy. "Grandpa, look, they wrote about you," she said, eyes bright. "They called you the man who outsmarted his own son." Her voice carried both pride and innocence, untouched by the meaning behind those words, only the joy of seeing my name in print. I took the paper. The ink still smelled new. A photo of me at the patent ceremony standing beside Harper and a group of young engineers. The smile in that photo felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. I set the paper down gently. "I'm not smarter than anyone, Sophie," I said. "I just learned that patience is the one thing people never value until they need it." She tilted her head, thinking. "Is patience when you don't yell even though everyone else is wrong?" I smiled. "Maybe. It's when you stay quiet, not because you're weak, but because you trust that time will do the talking." The bell jingled again. Claire walked in, brown coat, 2 takeaway coffees in hand. She set one down in front of me. Still drink it black, I nodded. Still do. She pulled out a chair and sat her face calm, peaceful. I saw Harper, she said. Neurasync wants to offer you an honorary advisor role for their new project. I shook my head. I've had enough honor for one lifetime. She smiled softly, eyes drifting toward the window. There's one more thing, she said. Ryan and Monica left Seattle this morning. I think they understand now. I sat quiet for a while, staring at the sunbeam stretching across the table's surface. Eleanor came over, refilled my cup. The scent of coffee mixed with paper and wood. Ryan was here yesterday, she said. I looked up. He asked if I still had that old photo of the four of you at the Neuraloop launch. She continued. I told him I did. He asked for a copy. I let him print one himself. I nodded, not surprised. People only truly repent, I said, when they start searching for the things they once threw away. Sophie dragged a chair beside me, climbed up, chin in her hands, as she looked out the window. Grandpa, is the ocean pretty today? I followed her gaze. Through the glass, the bay shimmered in sunlight. Gentle waves lapped at the wooden pier. It's beautiful, I said. I think the water's calmer than usual. She nodded wisely. Then you should go walk by it. The sea only stays calm when people do. I laughed, soft and full. You sound just like Grandma Ellen. Sophie's eyes widened. Did she say things like that? All the time, I said. Claire touched my shoulder lightly. Dad, I'm taking Sophie to Kerry Park later up on the hill. You want to come? The view's good today. I thought for a moment, then nodded. It's been a while since I've seen Seattle from a distance. Sometimes you have to step back to see how a city heals itself. Sophie slipped her hand into mine. When I grow up, she said, I'll tell everyone your story. Why's that, I asked. Because people should know that being quiet can still be strong. On the drive home, the wind from the sound came through the open window, salt sunlight, and the faint hum of waves. I thought of Ellen, of Ryan, of Claire and Sophie, of the lines of code that once held all my hope and now were just witnesses to a long journey. Maybe new beginnings aren't about rewriting anything, but about continuing without needing to prove a thing. As the car turned onto the road along the bay, sunlight hit the water flaring like liquid fire. I stopped. The car rolled down the window and took a deep breath. Salt. Life. Freedom. In that moment, I knew everything had returned to where it belonged. Even me. Late afternoon draped itself over the Seattle pier, the last light spreading across the bay like a thin sheet of gold silk, trembling over the ripples. I sat on the same old wooden bench at the end of the dock, the one where gulls traced slow, uncertain arcs in the air, crying once before vanishing into the bright haze. The air smelled of salt and weathered wood, and faintly of the diesel from fishing boats moored nearby. Everything around me was still, except for the steady pulse of waves brushing against the pylons, soft, rhythmic, like breathing. Ahead, the sun was sinking behind the city skyline. Its reflection glowed across the water, so warm and close, I could almost believe I might reach out and feel heat. I exhaled slowly. Something inside me, a knot I'd carried for years, came undone in that moment. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out an old ID card. Its once deep blue had faded to gray, the words Northbridge Systems barely visible now. The barcode on the back still caught the light, the employee number engraved like a ghost. I turned it in my hands, letting the sun catch the tiny scratches. Once this little piece of plastic was pride. Later, it was humiliation. And now it was just what it had always been, a thin sliver of plastic lighter than a memory gone cold. I stared out at the water, hearing echoes of that dinner months ago. The laughter, the words that landed like blades, poor, pitiful. At the time, they cut deep. But tonight, with the Seattle sky burning into dusk, I understood something. Being poor was never about money. It was about respect. Money can buy silence, but it can't buy dignity. A breeze moved through, roughening the water. The gulls lifted wings, beating sharply, scattering the last golden dust of sunlight. I smiled, then opened my hand. The card slipped from my fingers, spun once in the air, caught a flash of dying light, then sank. Small rings of water rippled outward, merged, and vanished. And I realized, as it disappeared, that the bitterness went with it. The sound of a ship's bell drifted from somewhere down the pier. On a boat nearby, an old fisherman reeled in his line, each motion slow and deliberate, as if speaking to himself. I thought of Ellen, and how she used to say that life was like fishing, not about what you caught, but knowing when to let the line go. Maybe I'd finally let go today. The sun was almost gone now. The sky shifted from gold to rose to deep violet, and the water mirrored it all, soft, endless, velvet-like. I leaned back, hands clasped loosely, letting the wind pass through my graying hair. And in that moment I could almost hear Ellen's voice, calm, teasing, as clear as the tide. She'd laugh, I thought, and tell me that I'd finally learned how to stay silent and still be heard. From far down the pier came the sound of small footsteps. Light hurried. Sophie. Her red jacket flashed between the wooden posts, her little hand clutching a melting cone of vanilla ice cream. "Grandpa, Mom said you'd be here," she called, and then she was in front of me, cheeks flushed from the cold. I opened my arms. She climbed onto the bench beside me, leaned her head against my shoulder. Her hair smelled like sugar and salt and wind. "Look," she whispered, pointing at the horizon, the sky's changing colors. "It is," I said quietly. "Beautiful, isn't it?" She nodded, eyes wide, unblinking, as if afraid the color might disappear if she looked away. A moment later, I heard another set of footsteps, slower, familiar. Claire. Her hair moved in the wind, catching what little light remained. She stood behind us for a moment, silent, before stepping closer. Sophie pointed again, and Claire smiled softly. "You did the right thing, Dad," she said. I looked at her. My voice came out even calm. "I just did what needed to be done." Nothing more. We stayed there 3 generations, saying nothing. The sunset bled into the bay gold, fracturing into silver, into shadow. And I felt something unspoken draw the 3 of us together, not blood, not obligation, but belief. The quiet understanding that what's right will always find its way home. Darkness began to rise from the water. One by one, the dock lights flickered on their reflections, trembling across the bay. I stood, brushed the wood dust from my hands, and touched Sophie's shoulder. "Time to go home," I said. She nodded, slipped her small hand into mine, warm, steady, real, and pulled me gently back toward the world, toward life, toward the piece of peace I thought I'd lost forever. As we walked away, the lights of Seattle shimmered across the water behind us, calm, golden, and still, the city breathing softly under the last promise of a day that had come full circle. If this story made you think about justice and dignity, share it, because sometimes silence isn't the absence of a voice, it's the sound of truth finally being heard.